Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. I'm your host, as always, Charlotte Stebbing-Mills. And if you are a long-term listener and you've not yet subscribed to this podcast, please go ahead and do so you don't miss any episodes. Because today is one you're not going to want to miss, which is with a lovely lady called Christine Braun, who is a globally recognized leadership and talent development expert with over 2 decades of experience. She's been known now for her ability to transform workplace cultures, create inclusive environments, and boost engagement, as well as many other things. And one of the things I absolutely love about Christine is her focus on DEI, but also like the real authenticity that comes with the work that she does, that helps her to help organizations to embrace change, create resilient teams, and really just create spaces not only inside the workplaces but outside the workplaces as well, where people can thrive and really be truly themselves. So I'm really excited, Christine, for you to be here today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Charlotte. It's a privilege. And just, seeing your smile is just bringing such a surge of energy. So I'm just so grateful to be part of the conversation and just to see what we can learn together today.
And there's always so much I learn from being around you. There always is. So I'm going to be like glued to every word that you say.
Well, the
And
feeling is mutual, Charlotte. The feeling is mutual. So
well, let's start then perhaps with what do we need to know about you that brought you to where you are today, so our listeners can really get to know you as well, because maybe they haven't had the same privilege that I have to get to know you off screen as well.
sure. Thanks, Charlotte. I mean, we all each have a story and a narrative that really does define where we are today. But I think overall, in a nutshell, I've had such a passion to really get down to the root of authenticity, whether it's been in my own leadership and even spiritual journey, whether it's been working with leaders to really help bring a sense of transparency in the way that they lead in their workplaces. But overall, I think, I've been so privileged to work with global leaders in many different industries. So from healthcare to transportation to government to insurance to sales, I've really been to work in so many different industries. And that really allowed me to see that, despite the differences that we have in industries, when we get down to the root of it all, we can really see that there's a common thread that we're missing in the way that we lead, that we're missing in workplaces, and even on a macro level, what we're missing in societies. And what I've come to see, it really does come down to how we lead from that authentic place, how we build more inclusive environments, all starting with ourselves. So that really just inspired me, one, to go deeper on my own authentic journey, as I mentioned before. And along with my business experience, I really just started to delve more into things like the martial arts to help me understand who I truly am as a leader, to things such as becoming a mindfulness coach in addition to a performance coach, and also doing a deeper journey into meditation as well. And all of those practices, and it's a journey, Charlotte, but what it's teaching me about authenticity, I'm such a firm believer to bring those realizations into organizations. So that's where what has brought me today of really kind of challenging the status quo in workplaces and going to that deeper place where we can really build trust, authenticity, wellness, and engagement. And I do, lastly, firmly believe that our workplaces are just a micro perspective of the macro of what's happening in our world.
Yep.
So when we really start to change ourselves, our communities, our workplaces, it's going to have such a positive ripple effect.
Yeah. Oh, I love everything about what you just said, because it really, a lot of it resonates with me both personally, but also like the way in which we see the ripple effect that workplaces can have on the greater society and on individuals. And I think sometimes we can forget that in the busy, fast pace of things. Like, you're based here in the UAE. I think you've come from Canada to here. That's right, isn't it? Canada to Abu Dhabi. So I'd be curious to know, like, if you can sense a shift in pace here, because I feel like sometimes when things are happening and moving quickly, we can forget the knock-on effects that our day-to-day behaviors and the way that we just speak to people can have on the wider society and on that macro level. Have you noticed any significant shifts from Canada to the UAE?
You know, a lot of people ask me this question, and I really gave it some thought to think about it. And in a way, it's refreshing because no, there's not really a difference. You know, despite the great intentions that we have in Canada or here or around the world, sometimes we still get so caught up in the results that it does become a checkbox exercise. Let me just tick the box. Yeah, we got the wellness. Tick the box. Yes, we got the DEI. But are we really seeing that deeper transformative change? So now that comes down to, it's not about countries, it's not about nations, but it just comes down to, you know, more of a global perspective of how we approach these things. We still think it's a quick fix. So this is more of a humanitarian or humanity perspective that we really need to look at of how do we really, you know, deliver these type of initiatives in a way that stick.
Yeah.
And lastly, Charlotte, one of the things that I noticed that is similar, and again, this goes beyond Canada and the UAE, but we all have a gift and a power. It's quite easy to create things. Wouldn't you agree? It's easy to create a program. It's easy to create initiative. We get excited about the idea. Equally, it's easily to just say, let's throw in the towel, forget about it. Let's just put it aside and start fresh. So it's easy to create and it's easy to destroy in a sense. But from that global perspective as HR leaders and any leaders that are looking to really make a change, where we really need power and our specialty to hone in on is how do we sustain things?
Yes.
So this is where it takes more of those, I can say more of those feminine qualities that we all have, men and women equally, but it is more about how do I nurture it? How do I sustain it? How do I bring awareness to other people so they can also be part of that co-creation process? It's not just one function or a few leaders trying to sustain or run a program. So I've actually noticed more similarities in terms of the pace and the purpose than differences.
That's really fascinating. The word that springs to mind is embodiment. Because like you said, we're fantastic at creating things. And one frustration that a lot of wellbeing leaders in organizations face, that they share quite openly with us in one of our masterminds and when we work with them just solely on their organization, is the frustration they feel when there's momentum and then the momentum dies off, and then it just naturally dissolves, and they never really move forward in a way that lasts. And a big part of, you know, your background and your present ground as well, but your story has been around martial arts, and I think that's a really interesting thing to think about as you're talking, because with martial arts, like typically you don't just go to learn to fight, right? You embody being a martial artist, but you embody everything, the way of life, like it just sits within you and it shows up in everything you do with your presence. And I feel like there's perhaps some parallels with that into perhaps the work that you're doing with organizations and creating that sustainable change. Is that fair to say?
That's a great question, Charlotte. And it's making me think of a few things again, you know, and why I joined the martial arts. And I was in my 20s, so I wasn't fairly young, but I wasn't very old either. But what drew me to it, and I'll make the parallel to the workplace, was it had nothing to do with the combat. It had nothing to do with the competition. I was so drawn to it for the tradition. And sometimes, you know, we're so big on innovation in workplaces, which is so crucial. But I always look at what the martial arts taught me. How do we also bring in the sense of tradition around values, consistency, patience, community, and family in the workplace?
Yeah.
So what I learned from the martial arts that I do try to bring in either the way that I lead or when I consult with different workplaces and organizations, one is that feeling of intuition and discernment. Because in the martial arts, you have to know when to move, when to pause, or when to deflect, for example. So now we're just talking all about energy. So as a leader in the workplace, Can we hone into our own energy to understand, okay, now's the time I need to take action, which takes courage.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe now's the time I just need to pause, listen, lean in, which also takes a different kind of courage.
Yeah.
So whether we call it discernment or intuition, particularly in the wellness space as leaders,
Yeah.
we really need to further nurture that and
Mm.
foster. And that's one of the things that I loved about the martial arts, what it taught me. And I don't have it perfect at all, but it invites me every day to reflect on that when I'm in the workplace or even when I'm just leading myself.
Yeah.
Now's the time not to speak, maybe just to hold silence so someone else can speak. Or holding silence also means sometimes that's when a new idea can emerge in a very natural way, because we tend to force things very often because we're afraid that if we don't, we might not be moving forward. But again, the martial arts also is about just patience and knowing that things will fall in the right place if we just give it some space to do so.
Yeah. That's so powerful just on its own. If we ended the podcast there, I think there's already so much value in what you've just said, because like we sometimes forget the fundamentals, which is why I love how you've mentioned like bringing the traditions and kind of linking that into this conversation, because we are quick to innovate, and particularly in this region we're also quick to tick the box. We are looking for quick fixes, and often we actually do need to pause, particularly when we look at well-being and organization. We need to pause, we need to zoom out and look at all of the levers that are being pulled that influence well-being of not just the individuals but of the organization and wider into the society as well. So I think there's a lot of value just in that, knowing when to pause, knowing when to step back and to when to lean in. What is your perspective on well-being in the workplace? Because sometimes people think of like, wellness is, the mindfulness, it's the breath work, it's the physical activity, or whatever. It's kind of put in that category. But I know a lot of the work that you do is about creating those inclusive environments, and I'm a true believer that has a massive impact on how somebody feels, thinks, and behaves and performs. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Great question, Charlotte. I'm just going to invite you and anyone who might be listening, you can close your eyes or you can, just keep your eyes open, but just kind of take a moment to go inwards. And if you think about, when you greet your best friend or a family member, or if you have children, your child or a pet, and you feel that connection and that embrace, what's the feeling that you have?
It's like aliveness, isn't it? It's like, for me anyway, I was doing that. I don't know.
Aliveness, aliveness,
aliveness, connection.
liveness. So, and maybe to others, it might be a feeling of just comfort or love or calmness or safety. Also when we go into our favorite coffee shop, we feel at home. So to me, whatever feeling everyone got at this moment, and I'm assuming that it's something positive, that's to me what wellness is. So when you go into your respective organization, you feel a sense of, I belong here. I feel a sense of, yeah, I really feel I could bring my very best here.
Yeah.
To me, wellness, which is connected to inclusivity and engagement, it doesn't mean that everything was perfect and rosy. Absolutely not. Again, in our family, around those that we love, do we never have any arguments? Of course we do. We will disagree. And sometimes, I have a best friend who's Italian, and she says her family really speaks things out when there's disagreements. But there's a sense of, I still want to be here. I feel safe. I feel loved. And even if I speak up because I see something that maybe, hey, I think there's a better way to do it, I still feel connected and that I belong here. So to me, wellness is really more about that feeling that we get, that sense of psychological safety.
Yeah.
And that's really where we can be the most creative and innovative,
Yeah.
and feel safe.
In your experience working with the different organizations that you have, what are some of the like live examples that you could give around what you've obviously just shared and how that's impacted like employee well-being in a way that's measurable? Because there might be some people listening to this that think he still sounds very nice, but but what do I do with that? You know, do you got any like kind of case
Absolutely.
studies?
Yes, absolutely. And I can remember, I mean, there's quite a few examples to give. So maybe this might be a merging of actually two examples, two stories. When I worked for a large government sector, which had lots of different layers, a very slow moving process, we really wanted to change culture. We really wanted employees and leaders to feel overall well. So one of the things that we did was, in addition to refreshing our competencies, we refreshed our values, which came from the voice of employees. But we also started to measure if we're acting upon those values in our performance appraisals.
Yeah.
So, for example, one of the values we were looking at that we knew would link to a high-performing culture and a culture of well-being and psychological safety was leading with compassion.
Yeah.
But Charlotte, I had so many leaders say, how do I measure leading with compassion? How do I know it's, showing up for me?
Yep.
So what we did was, and if anyone's looking to do this in their workplace, I would really encourage, to talk about what does compassion look, feel, and sound like for you and your respective organization? Because compassion might look different, in one organization compared to another. There's no right or wrong.
Yep.
But then to really have conversations around that. What would we be seeing? What would we be hearing? What would we, and we created, a leader's playbook and an employee's playbook, just giving examples of what it might look, feel, and sound like.
Nice.
Then we provided awareness training. Then we took them through experiential learning, to really sit with different type of leaders and coaches and going through compassionate conversations and how they felt about that. So as you said before, Charlotte, it became more of an embodiment.
Yeah.
And then we did measure on it.
Yeah.
So we had a ranking system of how much compassion was showed in the delivery of this particular project.
Interesting.
So someone might hit the mark on their results and deliver the project. So they did the what, but the how they were also measured on. Did they do it in a compassionate way? Or did they just bulldoze and leave everyone out of the picture?
Interesting. And who ranked them? Did their team then rank them in that review?
A great question. It was their leaders and their peers as well. So we also incorporated a 180 as well. And their own self-reflection too.
Yeah, good.
So the first thing, so we had some measurable tactics in place. Yeah. But even just the conversation around compassion and what does it look like? Yeah. This already started to shift, very subtly, but very powerfully, what is possible in terms of wellness and workplace culture.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of people speaking about values and behaviors and how important they are. And I think it's fair to say, and probably anyone listening is like, we understand that that's really, really important, but the measurement of it and including it in that performance review process is critical. And there are some more forward-thinking organizations that are already having some kind of well-being metric, but often we're perhaps falling into some binary ways of thinking around it needs to be about physical well-being, right? Or it needs to be around like and certain number of initiatives that are done within well-being, right? Rather than it actually being about the behavior itself. So linking the behavior to the performance that is stemming from the values that not only come from the organization, but come from the team, you said as well. Like that, I think is a beautiful through line to really be able to land that sense of embodiment with obviously the follow-up support that came with awareness and education and experiential training and things. Like I can really see how that would work. What were some of the like real key outcomes that you saw in that organization? Like you said, obviously you felt the needle move in terms of compassion, that behavior. Was there anything else that was notable?
Absolutely. I think communication was starting to become more transparent.
Nice.
So we saw that there were more team dialogues that were happening. So when we did, our engagement surveys, but then also more of these micro pulse surveys where we just check in with teams, what's shifting around, for example, the value of compassion or inclusion. And we started to see that there were more conversations that were happening. Leaders were initiating more team huddles where, for example, at the beginning of their week, let's say it's a Monday, they'd say, okay, team, what do you have on the radar for this week? Any obstacles, etc. But then there was a time that was carved out, even if it was 5 minutes, Charlotte, we were starting to see this more consistently. That 5 minutes was given some time to around, how do you want compassion to show up for you when you move forward this week? What can I do as a leader so that you feel a bit more compassionate? And even if it was just 1, 2, 3, 5 minutes max, the fact that those conversations were happening, it was really starting to open up the door for people to recognize that, we can start talking about this.
Yeah.
We also started to offer more additional leadership training around compassionate leadership, inclusion leadership, to really help leaders understand that they were champions for that value in the workplace.
Yeah.
So just within 4 to 5 months, these are some small yet very significant changes that we were seeing.
I love that because it's very practical, but it is also very embedded as well, like within then the who someone is being. We talk a lot in the workplace, don't we, about getting things done and being productive and performing to achieve a certain outcome. But I think often we can forget who are we being as we are doing. And I think that example that you've shared really kind of brings all of that together really nicely. You've mentioned, Christine, around like inclusion leadership, right, or inclusive leadership. And I would love to hear from you, like what is that? What does that look like? If we was to dissect that a little bit, what are maybe some of the components or the pillars of that?
Mm-hmm. Again, another great question. And I'm thinking, the opposite of inclusion, maybe we can start there. Because I think all of us, no matter where we're living in the world, who we are, what we've gone through, I think all of us at some point in our life, we may have gone through a feeling of rejection, a feeling of, I don't feel I belong here. Maybe even something we've rejected about ourselves. We all have an inner critic in our mind that says we're not good enough, we can't do it. So that is one example. I think as global citizens, we've all experienced some degree of rejection. So I took you there for a moment because you know what that feels like. It doesn't feel good, does it?
No.
But now if we turn on the light and we shift the spectrum of that to move to inclusion, again, it's that feeling of I belong here.
Yeah.
I feel heard. I feel seen. I feel supported to really play my part as an employee or a leader.
Yeah.
So inclusive leadership is really the awareness and responsibilities that leaders see that I need to create kind of like a whole sacred, welcoming, opening place for my employees. Again, Charlotte, that doesn't mean that I can't have a tough conversation with my team. That doesn't mean that sometimes you and I might have to hash it out. But we feel this great degree of respect and care and belonging.
Yeah.
And that we want to move forward together. So inclusive leadership is really, again, as a leader, I need to be responsible for my own self-awareness, being aware of my own triggers that might, block doors or block open communication. As an inclusive leader, I need to be courageous to challenge my own unconscious biases and lean in to ask questions. I need to have a very collaborative, open mind and heart to want to work at this together. No longer will the sole leader be, leading the organization. It's really a co-creation process.
Mm-hmm.
And lastly, I need to have a lot of cultural intelligence too. We talk a lot about emotional intelligence, which is definitely part of inclusive environments and leading inclusively.
Mm-hmm.
But I also need to understand, I just recently wrote a post about this, the way that I want to be treated may not be the same way that you want to be treated. And we hear this often, growing up, treat others as you want to
You want to be treated.
be treated. It's a golden rule.
Mm-hmm.
But inclusive leaders recognize, no, that actually comes with some bias. You might need to be treated in a very different way than I am.
Yeah.
So can I start to lean in and understand and come to know you better so I can lead and support you in the best way? That's inclusive leadership.
Brilliant answer again, obviously, Christine. I think the interesting thing that we see here in this region, I think, is that we are very aware, I think, now that cultural intelligence is necessary for us to hone in on it and to really be understanding the different nuances of different cultures. But I also feel that we are a little late to the party for that. So it's a work in progress, which can sometimes be frustrating for some people on the end of maybe some more uncomfortable situations when it comes to lack of cultural intelligence. But that's for me, that's a good thing. We're moving in the right direction, right? And I'm just happy that this is part of the dialogues and this is something that organizations are looking at. But I also think we fall into a bit of a singular way of thinking when we then look at things like gender. It's like, well, okay, we need to have this for women, and we need to have this for men, we need to have this for parents, right, as well. Like, and it's like we're thinking about well-being and perhaps inclusion through these segmented groups. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that's okay, but I think we're missing one of the key points that you've raised here, which is just the human being and the core needs that we all have to be seen, heard, and understood. It doesn't mean that I need to have a menopause coach on hand or a men's mental health person on hand. It just, I think we're getting stuck maybe at that level, and we're not perhaps deep diving any further. What's your thoughts?
I agree wholeheartedly. It's almost like we've flipped it, meaning the foundation first needs to be, how do we create a culture, an organizational feeling, a team atmosphere where everyone feels first. I guess I know my reasoning why I'm here. I do feel included. I do feel heard. I do feel seen. So we've almost skipped, as you said, that process. I agree with you. And we went right into the massive amount of employee resource groups, which are important, as you say. We went into a lot of subsections of different programming to support different genders, different initiatives, but by missing that foundation, that anchor. So, my humble perspective, what I'm seeing is, can we really get back to the root and get to that basis of how do we ensure everyone does feel heard, welcomed, and accepted?
Yeah.
Because that goes beyond gender.
Yeah.
As you said, it goes beyond the humanity of it.
Yeah. So that's,
and yes, please go ahead.
That's
please
the
go
question, isn't it? How? So
How?
from your humble perspective, what is the how? How do we do that? How do we get back to our roots of humanity in the workplace? Big question, I know.
Yeah, it might mean not stopping our employee resource groups. I'm not advocating that.
Yeah.
But just shifting a little bit of the attention and intention. So for example, let's use the example of values, because I've seen the power of values that are really embodied into the ecosystem of organization and how it supports wellness.
Yeah.
So is there an opportunity to go out into your organization and to refresh your values and ask employees, what's most important for you here?
Yeah.
And try to find some type of collective themes that we're hearing. So I've done that in one organization where we did what was called an enterprise listening tour.
Okay.
We went out to over 6,000 employees and asked them that question, Charlotte, what values are most important to you when you come to the workplace? What value do you want to see in your leader? What type of learning really inspires you?
Yeah.
So we need to find that commonality again, because one thing that I still do observe is that the values, and we're just using values as an example, it's still coming from the top down.
Yep, exactly.
But let's start top and also grassroots level and meet in the middle. Here's the commonality that we heard.
Yep.
And then build definitions that have a built-in spectrum line. Am I saying that right? Continuum.
Yep.
So again, one example, just to close on this question, when we looked at courage, some employees in the organization said, yes, this value is so important, but Christine, courage to me means that sometimes I just need to be patient. Okay, great. We have one definition of courage.
Yeah.
And then I go speak to another individual, a leader, and ask them, what does courage mean to you? Oh, taking that bold action, like jumping out of an airplane.
Yeah.
Okay, we have two different definitions of courage.
Yeah.
How do we embrace it and also find the middle of it? So we built in both definitions, and we encouraged people, use the right discernment to know which degree of courage you need to bring to a particular situation. See, it's not one size fits all.
Exactly.
So we have commonality, but within that commonality, we built individual expression.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. It really does. And it's like music to my ears, because I think you've just articulated something really, really nicely that I've always felt has been missing. I know there are some fantastic companies out there that will do lots of different values workshops and things like that. But the way that you get both the personal values and the organizational values to meet in the middle, I think is critical. We see this in like relationships, like relationship coaching. It's not that two people have the same values all of the time, but they complement each other. They know what each other values, therefore it works, right? And it's now this cohesive unit, and we have a huge opportunity to bring that into the workplace. And the matter of it, what I've seen here is often, and again, this is a generalization, it's not always the case, but values are printed out on a wall because either a marketing team has come up with them and said to the organization, this is what you need to have, and this fits, and this is what you're paying us to do, these are your values, let's make them look pretty on the wall. Or sometimes the ones that are a little bit more aware and conscious, the founders or the organization will create those values, but then it is top down. And then it's, let's all have a training on what these values are, what they mean, and this is what you now need to go away and learn how to act like. And that typically is what we're seeing with a lot of organizations. Yes. So the listening to then the individual's expression of not only the organizational values, but their core values is necessary, because I think people are not aware that 80% of our self-initiated motivation comes from our core values. Right? So if 80% of it comes from my internal drive, what values the most to me, only 20% of what you tell me at work is actually going to get me to do that bit extra. The rest of it's coming from me. So if we're not seeing it as individuals, how do we connect with an organization? I think it's through that channel that you've just described so beautifully. I love it so much. So I'm curious to know from your perspective the role in which like recruitment would play, or onboarding, because I really believe that like well-being starts right when the minute somebody interacts with your organization, whether you're a customer or an employee, it doesn't matter. So I think at the very beginning, and this is something we do with our core team at Wellness Theory, is we will always understand and do actually a values elicitation exercise with anybody that comes to work for us. So we don't just give them a list of values and say, right, which one are yours? We will actually take them through an exercise and understand their values to see if they are perhaps the right fit for our organization. And I understand like teams, with organizations have got like 6,000 employees and maybe they don't have the resources, but could that be a missed opportunity and something that would really get the right fit, the right person, the right place? I mean, I'd love to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you that, this connection starts from the very first hello, whether it's through email or I'm calling you, Charlotte, I'm interested in this role. Yeah. That first moment is an opportunity to really be a sample of the culture of the organization, the values that are brought on board, and whether it's through a values exercise or some type of exploration of, is this person the right fit for our workplace culture? And is our workplace culture the right fit for them? It's equal.
Yeah.
I think we know this intellectually.
Mhm.
However, I still feel, again, this is just all through observation and just, again, my humble, perspective, that sometimes companies still think that I want to see that this person joins on board. I'm judging them if they're the right fit.
Mm.
No, just equally, it's a partnership. The prospective employee has the right to assess if this is the
Mm.
right place, because from that values perspective,
Mhm.
there does need to be an alignment.
Yeah.
So yes, I do agree. It is a missed opportunity if we don't explore that in the beginning recruitment process.
I think as well, like the generations coming through now seem to be a lot more self-aware, and they know that it's actually really they're testing the organization to see if that's the place they want to work. Whereas when I first started in the workplace, like I would be nervous going to an interview thinking, oh, are they going to like me? Am I good enough for them? And it was only when somebody actually said to me, well, actually, are they good enough for you? And I was like, like nerves, no more nerves ever again in an interview after that, because it just flipped it for me completely. But I think we're getting to a place now, perhaps, where people are more self-aware. They know they've got more options. The wonders of technology means that people can be earning money without having to go to an organization, right? Like, so that dependence isn't there as much. This like lack mindset that can sometimes be around things is no longer there. And I think organizations are in this period of transition, and something needs to change. And I don't necessarily know that we have all the answers to everything that needs to change, but I think this it's a good starting point, isn't it, to understand that it's a two-way street and it's a partnership.
It is, and it just starts with that awareness. And I was also thinking, again, the younger generation coming through, but also I think most of us are starting to recognize the fragility
Mm.
of life, of our planet, of our ecosystems, of our workplaces as well, too. So maybe more and more we're also waking up as more conscious leaders and individuals as well to say, I really want to be in a place where I can feel I could contribute.
Yeah.
I think we're all feeling something. Some of us might be more awake to it at this moment than others. We each,
Yeah.
just have our own process and journey to that.
Yeah.
But maybe that's part of it too. I wonder. I
Yeah.
wonder.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And I think, nothing happens in silo, does it? And it all has an
No,
effect on the other. So I think you're absolutely right. It's important light to shine onto the conversation. And it's interesting you use the word fragile, because you talk a lot about anti-fragility mindset in the work that you do and resilience 2.0. Tell us more about this.
sure. So anti-fragility, I mean, anyone can research it at this point because it's quite a growing topic on the internet and in the way that we lead. But what I love about it and how it's different from resilience. So if you could imagine a tennis ball or a ping pong ball, tennis
Mhm.
table ball, like in front of you, if you're holding it, and what would happen if you just bounced it on your table? What would happen?
Huh. Things will probably shake a little bit, but then it'll come back up.
Yeah, it will bounce back up. But its shape, it's still going to be a ball. It hasn't changed. So resilience to me is a great expression to this ping pong or to this tennis ball, that it's our ability to bounce back
Mhm.
when something gets tough or something gets complicated. We bounce back. I bounce the tennis ball, it's going to bounce back. The form is the same.
Yep.
And we need this. We need this ability to bounce back every single day.
Yep.
Now, if we just took resilience to 2.0 and met its cousin, anti-fragility,
Mhm.
the concept of anti-fragility is really about, it's more than me bouncing back. It's actually me changing or transforming in the midst of chaos.
Mm.
So sometimes when we have a difficult situation, Charlotte, we might say to ourselves, okay, I'm resilient. I'm going to get through it. Okay, I made it through. Thank goodness. Now I could go back to normal. I've learned a couple lessons, great, but now I'm back to my formal status quo.
Yeah.
Where again, anti-fragility is, as a leader or as an individual, we see chaos in front of us and we say, this is fantastic. I know I'm just going to thrive.
Yeah.
in this situation. And it's similar to, for anyone who's gone to exercise before, let's say we want to grow our bicep muscle or arm muscle, we
Yeah.
pick up a weight, we put it under this pressure, this chaos. But what happens? The muscle, it will grow. It won't be the same as before.
Yeah.
It's going to grow. So I think and feel at this point in our life that we need resiliency. We need this ability to bounce back.
Mm.
But I think the world, what's happening in our workplaces, in the world collectively,
Yeah.
we're being encouraged. We need to step up a little bit and really know how I can thrive now in chaos
Yeah.
and grow as a result.
That's really interesting, isn't it? Because we saw through COVID, didn't we? Like in the beginning, it was like everybody was wishing things to go back to the way they were, like the bounce back. But then everyone was like, well, no, what's the new normal? Because it can never go back. And there was this like global shift of this thinking, obviously in different ways, but it emphasized the same point, is that we need to evolve when we go through these times. We can't just keep going back to the thing that was perhaps there before. And there's an interesting perspective that this really shifted my perspective on what resilience meant and how I understood it personally. And I remember drawing this picture, so hopefully I'll articulate this well in my journal. And basically, I would saw resilience as us sitting there with like a shield, right? So when we're resilient, things can come to us, but they'll bounce off again, right? And they'll bounce away. And I was like, no, that's like an old paradigm of resilience. So next to it, I drew, well, what's the new paradigm? And it was this suddenly this like realization that actually, no, when things flow through us, put the shield away. We don't need a shield. We're not trying to defend ourselves in any way. Yes, we want to be safe, but if we are anchored into ourselves, we are safe. And the challenges can flow through us, right? So rather than this deflection all the time, it was actually, no, it's going to come, it's going to go, it's going to come, it's going to go, and we don't have to hold it, we don't have to hold on to it. And I think sometimes we can go wrong, or create more suffering, should I say, rather than go wrong, when we are trying to hold on or to defend, because that, I think, blocks us from potentially the evolution and what can come next. Because if everything's flowing through us, right, and we're accepting it, we're letting it go, we're accepting it, we're letting it go, and there's a learning that comes when we do that, well, then we get to be better the next time, right? We get to shift.
Absolutely.
Shift, I know, is
I
one of your
love
makes
I love it. I love it, Charlotte. And it's so right. And again, it brought me back of this idea from the martial arts as well, too. If something is attacking you,
Mhm.
we don't actually block anything. We just maneuver or deflect to
Yeah.
change the energy, to use that momentum to create something better.
Yeah.
So I loved what you said, and I was feeling empowered,
Mhm.
from what you were sharing, that, yeah, it's just this ability. Don't be afraid of just anything. Trust in your own inner wisdom, your own resilience, your own anti-fragility, knowing that whatever comes, we have the capacity to move through it and
Yeah.
to change it.
And I think on an individual level, for me personally, when I had that realization, I think that was a period in my life where I started to recognize, well, no, I am safe. I'm safe within myself. And that was a bit of a journey. That's a
Uh,
story for another day, I think. If anyone
I'd
wants to
love
listen
to
to that,
hear.
that's
I'd
the
love to hear.
but for me, like the way I then look at that is, okay, well, if I'm going to allow whatever it is that I thought was attacking me, whatever it is, whatever resilience it was that I needed, whatever challenges, let's say COVID, for example, a pandemic, right? It's like we was all experiencing different kinds of challenges at that time. But for some, we were trying to just almost protect ourselves. But for some, it didn't really bother them because they felt okay. They were like, no, I've got my needs are being met. I'm okay, right? We can ride this out and it's not an issue. Those were the people that letting it kind of just flow through them and letting it flow. And when we
Right.
think about that in parallel, perhaps into a workplace, is when we feel safe and our needs are being met, we are able to then allow things to flow through. When there are challenges, we don't hold them or hope that our boss doesn't find out, or to be paralyzed in making a decision as a leader because we fear that it might go wrong. There's an element of safety, which I think really underpins some of the pillars of that leadership style that you described earlier, around trust, around courage, around having all of those nuances in play. that breeds safety within an organization, so people can make mistakes, they can learn from the challenges, and that we're not in this place of fear or like hard power, or and I know you talk a lot about soft power, so I'd love for you to share your insights on that and what that actually means. But I feel like it's so incredibly linked that we can't
It is.
ignore it anymore.
Wow, I just love everything that you're sharing, Charlotte, and I love the energy that you're bringing as well. And yeah, we touched on a few things, but to bring it back then to, how does this really transform or transpire into soft power? What is soft power? How and why do we lead with soft power? Again, I'm just going to bring the example because I want everyone to feel this, but the feeling when someone tells you to do something, right? Whether it was a parent or maybe a leader, maybe something happened at work yesterday and someone told you do this. What's the automatic feeling that comes?
I guess for me, it depends who's asked me and what the context is, but maybe some resistance.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you're right, it does depend. It
Yeah.
does depend. And we'll get to that as well, too. Yes, we're going to feel a little bit like resistance, even if it's so subtle, even for the most highly aware individual, there'll still be a little bit of a reaction because that's just how we've been geared. But I can be aware of it so it doesn't overwhelm me.
Yeah.
Now, if we shift that to someone that says, Charlotte, I would love for you to do this because you bring X, Y, and Z to this situation. I'm here to support you. It's so important that you do this for the team and the organization.
Yeah.
How do you feel then?
Yeah, empowered, right? I want to do it. I want to bend over backwards for you.
Empowered, even if there's a bit of resistance, you feel, okay, my leader has my back. He or she's going to help me through it. So the first example was hard power or authoritative leadership.
Yeah.
And we know that doesn't work, especially with newer generations coming through. But this soft power leadership, which was the second example, which is really more about how do I influence? How do I inspire?
Yeah.
How do I bring you part of the bigger picture and help you to see your part in it?
Yeah.
So even if, a team member comes to me and says, Christine, this vision looks great, but I can't do it. I don't know.
Yeah.
My role as a soft power leader is to use the trait of compassion to help them reconnect to their greatest strengths, to coach them to that, and to hold them accountable to it. So it's actually coming from a place of inspiration, love, you can do it. And one leader that comes to mind that I'm sure everybody knows is Nelson Mandela. He is a great example of someone who led with soft power, meaning he had a tremendous ability to really paint a bigger picture of how everyone has an important part to play in it, their specific role. He coached always to strengths. And he held people accountable to that as well. And actually here in this area, Charlotte, if those of you wanted to Google soft power leadership, in our beautiful place where we're living here in the UAE, that's one of our mandates to lead with soft power, which is more about influencing around culture, collaboration, our story, etc. Transferring that to the workplace, again, it really means leading from that place of inclusion, empowerment, coaching to strengths.
I love that. I'd love to deep dive into that a little bit more, because that's part of the region's vision, isn't it? And the more we can align with that, again, the more coherent our society becomes as well. Something that sprung to mind there, Christine, when you were speaking is, and I think maybe you would have heard of him for sure, is Dr. David Hawkins, the author, and he's done many books, but the one that springs to mind for me is Power versus Force. Have you seen his work? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
And for our listeners that perhaps not so aware, so basically, all of his books I think are fantastic, but Power versus Force is really interesting because it looks at like the science and the frequency of different emotions that we experience and our behaviors that are related to it. And what they found is when we are leading by force, or when we're forcing something, anything, even if it's not leadership, we trigger a more lower vibrational state or emotion, right? Which is then weaker. If the vibration is lower, when we're talking about science and the hertz of the frequency of which an action is being made, it's actually weaker. But when we come from a place of power and we trigger empowering feelings, right, or higher vibrational feelings, there's more strength that comes because those vibrations are literally faster, right? We're building more strength. So there's science to back this up as well, and it's really interesting because it's just connecting some dots for me because I didn't think about it like that before this conversation. Again, it's just another example of everything's linked, isn't it? We can't get
It
away.
is, and it is, but you say something very interesting too, Charlotte, and maybe, it's for another podcast, and I know you have some great guests on that maybe, someone may have additional perspectives to share on it, but we can't underestimate that if we want to lead differently and really bring wellness to a different level in the workplace, which is so, so needed now,
Yep.
we do have to move forward a little bit faster because of the state of where most of us are. We know mental health is rising. We have to really be open to understanding that the way that I lead, the way that I bring my presence, even the tone of my voice as a leader carries energy
Yeah.
that can either inspire and help us move forward from that place of trust, openness, inclusivity,
Yeah.
or the opposite, where it instills more fear. Then we're all just, being robots in a workplace and not really tapping into what our greatest potential is. And then we get stuck collectively, individually.
Yeah.
So a great topic to go deeper into how energy and the way that we lead is connected to wellness in the workplace.
Definitely. And it's very much connected to our emotional state, right? Our emotions drive a lot of our behaviors to some extent. And
Yes.
and emotions are energy. It's exactly that. And the things around us will influence our energy, including obviously ourselves, but anything that we interact with. And I think we've been denying that for a while, particularly in workplaces, because we rarely use the word emotion, right? Because that might be opening Pandora's box of something I'm not comfortable with, right? And it's, I think if we can actually just say, okay, hang on a minute, my whole team have emotions. How are they doing? One, are they regulated? Are we creating an environment that helps them to stay regulated, or at least supports them if they feel dysregulated? And I think if we just started there, I mean, just imagine like that might even just move that needle in such a huge way.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Interesting. Okay, right. I'm going off on tangents now, and I'm very aware of the time, Christine. I can sit and talk to you all day long. So I would love to
Same
just
here,
ask
Charlotte.
you. I'd love to ask you, what is something that I haven't asked you that perhaps you wish I had or you'd like to bring to this conversation today?
What's coming to my heart, and it's not that you haven't asked me it, but I think there's an opportunity for all of us. And whether it links back to soft power leadership or inclusive leadership or DEI, conscious leadership, whatever you might want to frame it as, I do feel that before we move into any action to create a new initiative around wellness in the workplace, for example, I feel that it's so important that we as leaders really take the time to work from the inside out. So we're still very quick to fix things on the outside. But as a leader, are we really taking enough time to do that self-reflection inwards, for me to discover my own triggers that could prevent me from leading in an inclusive way, to take time and sit with my emotions, to take time in silence, to really find my own courage to face my own inner demons as well. Because we can have the best workplace wellness initiatives, but if we're not continually doing that inner work, we will only get so far.
Yep, 100%. I couldn't agree with that more. I really couldn't. And I think that's a beautiful place to wrap up this conversation. And I think if any of our listeners want to learn more about all the approaches we've talked about today, but particularly leading from the inside out, I think it would be great for them to come and follow up with you and get to know and touch and feel your work more deeply. So Christine, where can our listeners find you and the work that you do?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn a lot and I love the platform just to share insights and learning. So anyone can find me, Christine Braun, on LinkedIn, and would love to connect through that platform, share ideas. I love learning and I'm just so grateful for everyone that I'm meeting here in this region and beyond. So that would be a great place to start.
Amazing, amazing. Christine, thank you so, so much. All of the places where they can find your work will be in the show notes of this podcast as well. So to make it easy. And thank you so much for coming today, sharing your
Thank
wisdom,
you, Charlotte.
time and your thoughts. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Charlotte. Really enjoyed the time.
If you enjoyed this episode and you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode.
Then share it with a friend who you think might benefit.
Spread the word. That's how we're going to impact the world, by helping each other.
We appreciate you so much, and as always, unconditional love and wellness to you.